listen to me. Well, as it turns out, at least as many people who want to watch, look at my writings.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, well, we're here in the home of Dr. Warren Farrell, author of The Boy Crisis, and with a special Father's Day edition. So welcome, Warren.
Thank you. I just loved our discussion last time and look forward to this one.
Yeah, it was obviously a big hit. I've thoroughly enjoyed reading The Boy Crisis. A couple of actually, as I was reading, I was like, as I'm reading, I'm like, oh man, I hope maybe I can like ask him these questions, like as I was reading through it, and then this opportunity came up. So I was obviously ecstatic to be able to come back and have a conversation with you again. But in particular, there's kind of two profound things that I was feeling and experiencing as I was reading your book. And I'd love to be able to address it because I feel like in today's climate and culture, I feel like there's a war right now between what you identify as the health conscious or the health intelligence and the heroic intelligence.
Yes.
So because of my personality type, the way I grew up, my own interests and personal interests, the first portion of the book, you do a brilliant job of laying out the differences between them. And as I was reading it, I began to find myself kind of struggling with this, like, okay, is this whole side of me wrong? Like the heroic intelligence side,
Yes.
And because what I realized, like the farther along I got, I realized what you were having to do is dismantle some of the strong-held opinions about men's role in regards to short-lived lives, dangerous jobs, the disposability of boys and men in our culture. Yes. And what I started realizing, and as I was reading it, I wasn't sure where you were going to land with the balance between the two. Like, were you like, I was waiting for this bomb to drop of like, and it's all bad. Like you
hero be bad.
Exactly. So I was actually kind of struggling. And eventually, like, you get to a point where then you obviously describe the balance between the two.
Yes.
And I'd love for you to just kind of share a little bit about that to kind of help either our listeners or people that are reading the book or thinking about it. Because right now, I feel like the argument is on one side, people are going to say this is just a men's activist book or like like either right wing kind of sort of that, I don't know, that whole movement, and then you're going to have other people look at this and they're going to hear the discussion between health intelligence and heroic intelligence and have kind of the opposite pendulum swing of like, he's just advocating that like guys are supposed to be weak pansies and just, not do anything, Can you share a little bit about that and that balance and what it was that kind of led you to that?
Yes, the word is balance, and if you're too off balance on one side or the other, you'll see me as being off balance on the other side. So
exactly.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
So here's the larger picture.
Okay.
Heroic intelligence was basically socialization or teaching a child to have a short life, a male to have a short life.
Yeah.
Health intelligence is an intelligence developed to have a long life.
Right.
But historically speaking, the way we've survived as a species and the way we've survived as a nation is training our sons to have heroic intelligence or socialization for a short life, to go at the age of 18, 19 into battle, to be willing to make sure the Nazis did not rule our country.
Yeah.
And we were, and millions of our lives, to say nothing of our freedom, has been saved as a result of the sacrifices made by our sons or boys, some of us now fathers, for that was preparation for ourselves to be willing to die. Now, how did we get persuaded to do that?
Yeah.
We got persuaded to do that by a part of our brain called the rostral cingulate zone that responds to approval and responds to social bribes. What I call in the Boy Crisis book, social bribes. Social bribes are, son, you are going to be a hero. You are a hero. You have done such a wonderful, you've served your country well. Yeah. And we need boys to do that. Firefighters. Most firefighters are volunteers. Their pay is not money. Their pay is social respect, social approval, or social bribes, the uniform that makes us look up to the firefighters. And in exchange for being looked up to, we say, risk your life. And not just risk your life directly in the fire, but risk your life in black lung disease and other cancers. A good friend of mine at the age of, in his early 50s, died of cancer coming from the result of him being a firefighter. Left 8 children behind, and a wife. And so these are the trainings of boys to be heroic. Now, this is not just the United States. All cultures do this. This is not just humans. Animals do this. Females are persuaded that 85% approximately of reproduction comes from the female reproducing with the alpha male. So during her mating period, she seeks out not an alpha male, but the alpha male. So example, buck elks. The females reproduce with the alpha male. But in order for that male to become an alpha male, he has to have the biggest antlers. And now what does it take to get the biggest antlers? It takes a reduction of calcium and minerals and nutrients in the body of about 30% in order to support the development and growth of those antlers. So he, if he doesn't get rid of those antlers immediately after mating period, by running on a bark of a tree, what happens is he's likely to die because he doesn't have enough time to replenish his nutrition before the winter comes. And so the strongest male is the weakest male. And so this is a metaphor for masculinity, that men's weakness is their facade of strength. And yet females are attracted to that strong male who appears to be strong with those antlers. And who in fact is, and so one of the things I explain in the Boy Crisis is that men's weakness is our facade of strength.
It kind of ties into, like, you see it on like either television shows or you read in books or whatever, but kind of like the girl's always like attracted to the bad boy. You know, back in the day, with the jeans and the white shirt and the whole, that whole kind of persona.
And that's because the bad boy, she didn't really want bad per se, but the bad boy is willing to take risks. He's willing to venture into territory that she doesn't feel comfortable risking herself.
It's like that weird kind of combination of confidence with risk taking. And it seems to overshadow a lot of the more necessary kind of emotional quotient that's required for healthy living.
Exactly. And so, if we teach our sons, and so I want to make it really clear that the key word is balance here. There's a huge amount of things that are positive about this heroic intelligence, the willingness to take risks. Almost every single entrepreneur, startup company that we have, we say, women don't get a fair shake in a corporation. Well, some of the biggest companies that exist worldwide are Apples and or our startup companies that were started by Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or so on. Those are almost all males who started these companies. And for each male that you've heard of, there's about 1,000 that have failed. And so there's but what those men have done is willingness to take those risks, willingness to be among the 1,000 that have failed, in order to be the possible one that succeeds and really makes it. And so, and then the women worship the men, that 1% or 1/10 of 1% that succeed, and don't realize that that many others have not made it, and they're dropped back. But it is important to be able to take risks, to think out of the box, to when the going gets tough. The motto for men is, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Well, that's not all good, and it's not all bad. It is important that when the going gets tough, you tap into your testosterone, you tap into your adrenaline, you tap into your forces, and still keep trying. And at the same time, you have to understand that you're weakening you're sapping your adrenaline,
Yeah.
and you're sapping your testosterone. And if you don't recover and give yourself time to recover and express your weakness and say, I'm tired now, I can't do this next thing even though it's expected of me, that's when you sacrifice your physical health. And eventually, if you don't have the capacity to be able to say, I want to, it's okay if I'm looked at as not being a hero.
Yeah.
I need to stop and balance my life. I need to be home. I need to not experience what I call the father's catch-22, which is that when a father is a father, he oftentimes takes on additional job responsibilities that takes him away from home. So the father's catch-22 is the father loving his family by being away from the love of his family.
Right.
And his heart is often broken.
Yeah.
And we need to say, not only do we acknowledge, dads, that your heart is broken by being away from the love of the family, but also that once your family is making about $50,000, $60,000 a year, depending on where you live in the country, that once you're making that level, the children benefit from more time, not more dime, if you will.
See, and you bring this context of, I actually had several kind of like real emotional moments as I was reading that. And I feel like a lot of people, in an effort to kind of achieve what you're describing, I've heard some other people kind of either talk about it, just that work-life balance. And oftentimes it comes across in what you're doing is bad. You need to stop it. And then what ends up happening is what you're saying is most men are motivated out of a pretty profound, deep love for their family and a desire to provide. And it almost kind of dishonors them in a way. And then it becomes this tit for tat sort of fight argument between the two, versus what you're saying is, hey, men, we honor you. We love you. Thank you. But it's time to look at the overall health and longevity, you know what I mean, of those the stuff that you're fighting to provide for. You also have to invest in those relationships. And
you are spot on, and this has been the real damage. The women's movement has done some amazing contributions, like expanding women's options, and giving us a sense of women being able to speak up and say what they want and who they want to be. That's the good news. But there's been a shadow side of all human beings, and the shadow side of the feminist movement was saying that was not seeing that as men became fathers, we got the message that we would be more appreciated and more needed if we spent time focusing on our work. So if we were, say, for example, the teacher in a high school, we learned that the principal or the superintendent of schools made more money. So we didn't ask ourselves, do I prefer to be a teacher or do I prefer to be an administrator? We said, what I need to do is to be that administrator. Right. If you were playing in a band or trying to write a novel or you're trying to be an artist, the 99% of men, when they become artists, realize that they're probably not going to make a good enough living to support a family by being an artist or a writer. My father told me, Warren, you cannot be an author, because 99% of authors do not make enough of a living to be responsible to their family. The men, when they become fathers, don't realize, the feminist movement never understood that the pay gap was not a gap between men and women. It was a gap between fathers and mothers. That's where the pay gap comes in. Because when children come, the mother often says, I want to either be full-time with the children, full-time with the workplace, or some combination of both. And if she chooses some combination of both, or full-time with the children, then that requires the father to make significantly more money. And so therefore, we're more likely to be rising into the top positions, and we're more likely to know that other men are more likely to make those sacrifices once they have families. So we're likely to be a little bit biased that a man is more likely to make that sacrifice once the family comes. So there's even biases against women hiring other men because the men know that. But the feminist movement looked at those men and said, oh, they have male privilege. They have male power. No, they actually, the obligation to earn more than women is the discrimination against men.
Yeah.
If you looked at it from a discrimination point of view, but it wasn't really discrimination against men any more than it was the male role that was expected to help our children survive and do the best that they could. The job of both fathers and mothers was exactly the same. Mothers made sacrifices of their lives to make sure their children had better lives. Dads made sacrifices of their lives to make sure their children had better lives, and to not honor, as you were saying, to not honor the sacrifices that men made, giving up the glints in their eyes to do what created money, when fulfilling occupations pay less as a rule, and less fulfilling occupations like collecting our garbage pay more than a person of equal amount of education would likely to be able to make.
You actually had a couple really kind of touching stories of some conversations you had with some people about talking to their father about like, hey, what was the glint in your eye? And that sort of like imagining process, and and it was interesting because one of the stories referenced where a father was retired, was kind of finished, and I think it was a daughter that kind of went back to her dad and was kind of having that dialogue, and it was almost kind of too late for their dad, and even the dad was kind of like, glint in my eye. I'm like, I was providing for everyone. Like, what do you mean? I didn't have time to even think about that, And the conversation, I'm kind of messing up some of the specific details, but the conversation was really powerful because what it ended in was, Dad, thank you. And the story was of how it kind of just restored and reignited the relationship and connection, where the child was kind of resentful for the time away that the dad had. And just, it just really got me thinking in how, we're coming up on Father's Day, and how Father's Day, it's interesting where there's this weird sort of pushback, like what about, guys that aren't dads, or what about moms, or what about, it's just kind of an interesting, kind of time, but it kind of brought up that thought of like, what Father's Day could be in that context. Of like, Dad, thank you. Like, legitimately thank you for this sacrifice, and almost giving, I'm wondering if there's a way that we can somehow give fathers permission to dream again, to find that glint in their eye. I don't know if there's a couple maybe tools or kind of conversation starters that you have that could help either kids talking with their fathers talking with their sons, to kind of bring that balance back. Where's the glint in your eye? Dreams, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of an interesting, thought. I don't know if you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think to explain a little bit more about what you had found of use in the book, was one of the things I do in almost all my presentations is I ask every person in my audience to just close their eyes, and I take them through a whole journey of finding the glint in their father's eye. Someday when they were, maybe their father painted a beautiful picture, or wrote a poem, or played with, if you're older, played with your children. And just, you saw him just having a different type of freedom with your children than he did with you. Or just being, flying in an airplane and just enjoying the freedom of flying in a small aircraft, or playing golf, or singing in a choir, singing in the church choir is oftentimes a real glint for many men. That gives them a special freedom. And so find that glint in your eye, of your father's eye, and then imagine your mom and dad when you were born. Saying that we're going to have and then think about the number of children your family did have. So maybe 2, 3, 4 children, and then projecting that there would be 2 or 3 or 4 children. And then let's say you're the first child, and your mom and dad sitting down and saying, now let's see, what will create more responsible, dependable income for our family? You painting these pictures you've been doing, you singing in the choir, you being an actor, which you're a really good actor, but maybe you're,
it's unstable,
it's
insecure.
Insecure. Like my father said to me, Warren, you're a good writer, but only 1 in 1,000 writers make it. So, you don't want to take that risk. It's irresponsible.
Yeah.
So you can see how irresponsible I was.
Exactly. Good advice. You took good advice.
Yes, right. So so just asking yourself what your dad's glint was versus what your dad needed to do to give up that glint, to do something like being the accountant or being the principal rather than the teacher, being the person who did a nationwide sales manager effort rather than a local sales effort where he could be home with you more often.
Right.
The tension that your dad experienced between the glint in his eye, which if he was a real man, quote unquote,
right.
he learned that he could not even ask himself the question, what is the glint in my eye? The moment he knew that he and your mom were going to have children is the moment he knew that was the secondary issue.
Yeah.
Now, this doesn't mean your dad didn't get the glint in his eye taken care of. But the glint in his eye transferred to become you growing up well.
Yeah.
And you being a person of high character, high integrity, of good values. And one more thing he would love, which would be to have you understand that he didn't earn more money than your mom because he had male privilege or male power. He earned more money than your mom because he loved you, and he was hoping that when you graduated from high school and you graduated from college, he could feel proud of you, that you were the glint in his eye.
Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic, because when someone kind of goes to that place of sacrifice, because it is sacrifice, it is that sense of like, man, I'm gonna, like, without even question, I'm gonna give this up because I'm gonna provide for my children,
And it's so sad we didn't have a feminist movement saying, women have made sacrifices of careers, but let's honor our dads for making sacrifices in their careers in order to earn more money for us. These men who earn more have done what we have begged of them to do. They've become the alpha male, and now we're condemning them for becoming the alpha male, but don't ask us to marry them if they don't become the alpha male.
Exactly.
And so the average boy is going through college and going, I don't really get this. I'm getting mixed messages on every issue, including sexuality. So it's like the boy just learns there's only one thing you can do safely, which is shut up. Because the women are saying, or some of the feminist women are saying, we've lived in a world of patriarchy, which has made rules to benefit men at the expense of women. Well, if men made rules to benefit men at the expense of women, they'd be socializing women to be very sexual very soon. They'd be socializing women to buy them diamond rings, and socializing women to buy them drinks, them dinner, so on. It is not a world in which men figured out rules to benefit men. They'd be asking women to register for the female-only draft while they sat back and voted without having any obligations. And so this is what a male dominate. But what is called the domination by patriarchy missed the point. It wasn't domination by patriarchy. It was domination by the need to survive. Survival was the dominating force.
See, it's interesting, growing up in another country, growing up in Africa, when
Where in Africa?
In Kenya.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we were there as a child. I was there for 11 years. For the first year, we actually lived in the bush. And then we moved to the city. And
did you really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
One of the things that was really interesting going into that environment was, in some of the tribal systems there, I can't speak for a whole, I can only speak for some of the ones we interacted with. There is a real strong patriarchy in the sense that when they actually saw my dad helping do work around the hut that we lived in, oftentimes the women would like run over and say, oh, no, you need to sit down, let me do that. And you'd watch, and the women would carry all of the firewood. They would be out working in the field, cooking, cleaning, and the men, once they got to a certain place, they would either fight and then they'd come and sit. And not do anything. And it's interesting when you actually see environments that are bent in that direction where it's there's one element of sacrifice that the men do, but then it is in the negative sense, that kind of patriarchy image. What we have in our country and what we've had for years in most of civilization is not that.
Yes.
It really isn't that. There really is a sense of partnership in many ways. And when you tell a man, hey, the sacrifice that you're doing is really male privilege, immediately, like I can't tell you how many men I've had conversations with where the career that they're in was not what they wanted to do.
Yes.
Was not their first choice.
Yes.
It wasn't, and the pain that they're communicating with about the pressure that they either feel from, societal bribes, which you talk a lot about, but also from their spouse even. And like, no, you can't build cabinets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, or you can't go and do this other thing over here. You can't, take some time off for this. And it's a really interesting, conversation. And what would you? Because I even experienced it too in some of the jobs I've been sitting in interviews, and the pressure to spend more time away from my family. I had a really hard time keeping my own personal boundaries, where me and my wife had, made certain choices in terms of like, hey, the value of both of us co-parenting, you know what I mean? Both of our involvement in our children's lives, maintaining, investing in dreams and the glint in our eye at the same time,
Yes.
kind of trying to navigate those waters. There was many times I was in managers' offices where the pressure of basically just sacrificing all of it for the sake. It is really interesting hearing you kind of discuss it on a broader scale and noticing my own kind of interaction, some of the corporate kind of levels of management that I was experiencing as well.
Absolutely. You, for example, are an extremely competent, sort of alpha male looking type of person.
Sure. Okay.
who obviously has a huge heart also. And so it's going to be extremely tempting for someone to say, we have a ministry here that you could really take over, and it has 1,000 people that come to church every week.
Yeah.
But as you investigate it, you'll see that ministry requires an enormous amount of your time.
Yeah.
And so here, you'll have less time with your family in order to have more time doing the thing that will give you more honor and prestige and so on. And so the social bribe will be for you to experience the father's catch-22, loving your family by being away from the love of your family.
Yeah.
And so it's so important for us to understand this, because as fathers, we have a new job. And that job is to, first of all, a larger picture.
Yeah.
When the Pew Research Center, that's PEW, that's a more liberal think tank research center, asked men for the first time in history what they would like to do if they could do anything they want. These are men who had full-time jobs, and they also had children.
Okay.
And they said, would you rather be full-time involved with your work or full-time involved with your children? 49% of men said, I'd prefer to be full-time involved with my children.
Wow.
Rather than, except that my family needs the income.
Yeah.
Now, the amazing thing is that question's never even been asked of men before.
Yeah.
Whereas we're always saying to women who are middle-class women who are married, what do you want more? Do you want to be full-time mom, full-time worker, or some combination of both? That's the standard operating procedure question.
Yeah.
So now translate that over to Father's Day.
Okay.
Your job as a dad is to realize that we don't have those old senses of purpose being as mandated as they used to be. That is, your son is not required anymore to have to go to war. He has the option of doing that, but he's not required to do that in order to be a man. Yeah. He's also not required to be a sole breadwinner. Yeah. The women are helping with that, share that burden. So your job as a dad comes down to doing two things with him. One, in addition to having lots of time with your children, and especially with your son, but also with your daughter for different and overlapping reasons. And secondly, to be have that time be consistent is very important as well.
Yeah.
And then to create a space for your children to say what they want, they need, have their feelings and fears expressed, especially their fears expressed without you judging or interrupting them too soon. So having family dinner nights is very pivotal in the development of a good Christian family. And so, and that family dinner night means no electronics.
Yeah.
And if you say, I can't prevent my children from taking electronics at the table, read The Boy Crisis and see that you can prevent your children from bringing electronics to the table. And you must. And it's your duty to.
Yeah.
And the electronics presence and your leverage over the electronics gives you leverage to do just that type of thing. Second, that it's not okay to not provide. That is, you need to provide time for your children to say what they need and want to say, and that some of that time needs to be uninterrupted and not looked at with askance or with value judgment by you.
Yeah.
If you want to facilitate your children's feelings and fears, you provide that safe time, but you also require them, don't suggest, but require them to provide that time for you to share your experiences, feelings, and fears.
Yeah.
Third, you must know, or whatever number it is, you must know as a dad what you contribute. There's about 10 differences between what I call in The Boy Crisis, dad style versus mom style.
Yeah.
And mom style is important to keep and to value. So you need to understand, for example,
so before you do this, really quick, just so listeners are clear, in the discussion of what fathers bring to the table here, in no way we're not minimizing the role of a mother. It just is that's been discussed. That there's a lot of books and research and discussion about that. There hasn't been too much about the role of a father.
Exactly.
And so the focus isn't devaluing one. It's saying we desperately need both.
Yes.
Here is what this is like going to empower fathers to know their role in the relationship and in the family. Like
this is what I call in The Boy Crisis checks and balance parenting.
Perfect. Okay.
That the children need the mom and they need the dad more than I ever knew.
Yeah.
And when they don't have that combination, that's when the 70 different areas of children doing worse and being deprived manifest.
Yeah.
That's when they're more likely to drop out of school. That's when they're less likely to have postponed gratification.
Yep.
That's when they're less likely to feel purposeless and rudderless. That's when they're more likely to move into addiction to video games and addiction to porn because they don't feel like anybody, they can relate to anybody on their level. That's the lack of father involvement is the highest, greatest, the single biggest predictor of drug addiction.
Wow.
So our opioid crisis has more to do with lack of father involvement than any other single factor. The suicide rate, which is 6 times for boys what it is for girls when the boys are in their early 20s, has more to do with lack of father involvement than almost any other factor.
Yeah.
We've all been concerned about school shootings and mass shootings, even that are not school shootings. 26 out of the 28 major school shootings, that is 8 or more, the recent Texas one being an exception to this rule, are marked by a lack of father involvement. The children who join ISIS, we think of them as terrible people, but they're also vulnerable people. Those are boys and girls, by the way, that have in common one thing. More than any other single thing, the recruits for ISIS are boys and girls with minimal or no father involvement.
Yeah.
And this is so surprising that the researchers who investigated this didn't even ask that question.
That's crazy.
But it came up on the part of the recruits so often that they said, this we missed. Let's go back and do it systematically.
Yeah.
And they said, my God, this is the number one variable, the number one predictor of joining ISIS. So just think about the billions, trillions of dollars that we would be saying, to say nothing of the psychological price of worrying about terrorism that we paid for. So this is all, and and so now let's see. I know that I was starting.
Here's
role of dads. The role of dads. So
yes.
The first role of dads is to tap into understanding what the mother is thinking and honor her for what she's thinking about as you are doing your role. The second role is for you to understand what your 10 differences in dad style are and what the value. Now we have hard research to know that that dad's style, when integrated with mom's style, produces the best outcome for children. I'll give an example of that.
Okay.
Let's say you as a dad are probably 10 times as likely to roughhouse.
Of course.
Kids, right?
Yes. Not only can I take the potential like bumps and bruises, but just personality wise, it's like, no, you're gonna get hurt. I'm like, they'll probably be okay.
Yes, exactly. And the mom, so the first thing you do as a dad is to understand that when you're roughhousing, here's what's going on in mom's mind. Oh God, one more child to monitor. I see the kids are having fun.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm asking you to imagine as a dad that the mom is thinking. Okay.
Right.
And you have to let the mom know that you empathize with her thinking these things. That's your first job. Okay. And what she's thinking is not just what I said, but also like, I have this feeling. Yes, the kids are having fun, but sooner or later, I can see the handwriting on the wall. They're going to have an accident, or or Jimmy's going to start crying, or Jane is going to feel it's too rough. Yeah. And is she right? Only 99% of the time.
Oh, of course. Yes, invariably, it ends with one person or more crying.
Yes, crying, exactly. And then she's saying to herself, I knew. She's feeling guilty that she didn't intervene sooner.
Yes.
And so she's feeling like bad about her not being as good a mom as she could be to protect the children.
Yeah.
Now,
this is almost comical. Like you describing this, it's laughable how exact that is for almost probably every home with moms and dads in it. You know, it's like, it's so funny. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and this is, so the dad, meantime, is not saying anything. He's just doing it.
Yeah.
But dad, you need to know the value of what you are doing. You need to know that that the roughhousing has multiple purposes, and this is just one of the 10 differences in dad style. That your roughhousing is creating an ability for your children to distinguish between when to be assertive and when to be aggressive. It creates an ability for your children to distinguish when having fun is going too far. How does it create that ability? In part by it going too far and leading to your child crying, or going too far and leading to your child hitting his or her head on the coffee table, and maybe even going to an emergency room, and maybe even breaking some bone in his or her body. But the more severe, up to a certain point, as long as life isn't threatened or it isn't too serious an injury, that injury or that which created the crying is what teaches your child to know when fun goes too far, when anything goes too far. Now we know that develops a different type of synapse connection in your child's brain, an increase in intelligence, an increase in the intelligence about what is assertive, what is aggressive, and it creates a neuron connection that isn't there before. Now, it doesn't just do those things. You have to explain to mom that it also creates a bond between you and the children. And that you have unwittingly been using that bond without even knowing it. And you've been using that bond to do things like say, okay, kids, enough roughhousing tonight. Or for now, get all your chores done, get your homework done, get changed, get your teeth brushed, and bedtime is 9 o'clock. And at whatever time you have done all those things and done them well, between that and 9 o'clock before that, that's your time. We can do more roughhousing. Mom's going, more roughhousing before bed? No way.
Totally. Don't get them riled up before bedtime.
Don't get them riled up before bedtime. Words out of almost every mom's mouth.
Exactly.
And the dad is going, we have a deal here. And if they want roughhousing before bedtime is okay. Maybe, but maybe not. They'll discover whether they can fall asleep before that. They'll discover whether getting riled up is a problem or not. For some it will be, for some it won't be. It's not an automatic. And and they also have a choice of, being read to a beautiful bedtime story or their favorite story and so on. But bedtime is 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
You don't get even your homework done. You don't use the lack of getting homework done as a way to manipulate me to make your bedtime 9:15 or 9:30. Whereas with mom, the child will be able to manipulate a later bedtime by choosing the right things that it hasn't done that the mom will want it to do, like homework, in order to manipulate a later bedtime.
Yeah.
So here's what the child is really learning. The child is learning that I have to focus on doing what I need to do, the homework, the chores, in order to get what I want, more excitement and fun with dad.
Totally.
And so that focus on what I need to do to get what I want, that is postponed. That's what creates postponed gratification.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing it described in this context too. It's almost as if you're capitalizing on an innate heroic intelligence in the context of risk taking, where you're almost, I know myself when we do wrestle time, it is an art of managing chaos. Like,
you got to say that again. It's brilliant and very important. It is an art of managing chaos. Yes, that is exactly correct.
Because you're kind of, when my daughter was born, she's, one, of course, she sees me wrestling with my two sons. What does she do? Screams, squeals, runs, and jumps into it. And the entire time, I'm basically just kind of protecting her from getting landed on while still throwing the boys and, kind of doing that business. But invariably, there would be interactions where somebody would jump too hard and land on someone or, kick their leg and, hit one of them in the head. And there, there's, the crying and the tears. And what I like about what you're saying is the sense of when our primary focus becomes safety, which is, it tends to be a little bit more of in the mother's sort of perspective, like, hey, don't get hurt. We want to, which is really good.
Yes.
But when that motivates some of the interactions, you actually miss out on that scale of kind of painful interactions that actually teach you things,
absolutely.
The negative consequences.
It's what psychologists call emotional intelligence under fire.
Okay.
And so it's sort of like an emergency comes and you have to be able to figure out, what do I need to do with all this management, the art of managing chaos, as you said. That's so important and such a beautiful phrase, because that's exactly what you're teaching the kids to do that. When you protect them from that, you don't give them that entire learning experience.
Yeah.
But this is not mom's fault for not understanding this.
Yeah, no.
We dads have not done our homework. We haven't found out what our contributions are, because the way we've gotten love throughout all of history is to earn the money. And so we didn't feel we were wanted here. But we not only are, whether we're wanted or not, is the secondary issue. The primary issue is that we are needed. That we are needed whether we know it or we don't. And we have a responsibility. Our new heroism is taking charge of knowing what we want. And instead of saying a happy wife is a happy life, if mom feels we're going too far, I'm going to back off. No, stand up for what is right for your children. Speak up. Listen to your wife. Listen to her needs and what she's contributing, but also share what you know about the value of dad being not the breadwinner. That's great, but in the home, remembering that once you get that $50,000, $60,000 a year, the rest of the benefits to the children come from time with dad, not a dime from dad. Yeah,
it's interesting in that one interaction, wrestle time, that sort of play. In the sort of kind of danger zone of wrestling and roughhousing, it's interesting just hearing that interaction, somebody gets bumped, somebody gets bruised, or that sort of thing. It's interesting how in that context, one of the big questions, and you talk a lot about it in the book, about how a father's role is actually helping your children develop empathy.
Yes.
But it's interesting, in those interactions, you can't develop empathy without also experiencing a measure of that kind of pain or consequences or that whole interaction, whether you're the kid getting hurt or whether you were the one that actually caused the pain, you know, invariably a dad's going to stop and say, hey, that was too hard.
Yes.
Look at what happened with your brother. Look what happened with your sister. Like, you have to take care of her. You know, you need to watch out for that, you know, and it's like those brief interactions like profoundly shift a child's perspective in terms of empathy. Like, oh, I can't hurt them, but I shouldn't. I need to watch out for that. Like, don't go too far.
That is exactly right. And the reason the child will pay attention to the dad is for two reasons. One is they feel bonded to the dad as a result of the play. And then secondly, the dad is willing to say, that's the end of roughhousing.
Yeah.
If you don't pay attention to your father or your brother's needs or your sister's needs, especially your sister's needs.
Yeah.
And especially if you're the older child and you're not heeding the younger child's needs, dad doesn't give you the option to ignore his or her needs. So the normal thing that children do is do everything they can to get the advantage and to win. And if they have a weaker one person around, is to bully them out. But you are teaching them as a father that is not okay. And if you do win that way, you will be a loser. By having no more time for me. And so the child learns that the way that I win is by empathizing, as opposed to the way that I win is by pushing someone out of the way and not empathizing. And so that's a good example of what creates this difference, that the art of the chaos, of managing chaos, as you were saying, is an art of understanding all of these things on an intuitive level. And every father that's listening, that has played with his children and that has multiple children, knows exactly what I'm talking about. And that's the good news. The bad news is that virtually no father that's listening has ever shared this with love with his wife, has ever shared this at family dinner night in a way that both mom can understand and the way the children know what is being given to them. So they will have an emotional intelligence to be able to give that to the children they're babysitting for, to their brothers and sisters, and to their children when they're an adult and a parent themselves.
I loved how you tied that into the health intelligence. We're shifting from the need to lose your life, where you're not like disqualifying that powerful ability or context, but removing the necessity of it for relationship and for approval. And then basically empowering children to say, no, like, we actually need you in the caretaking professions. We need you in the more nurturing professions to help develop this culturally. Like, we can't maintain this vacuum any longer. Like, we've got to make a shift. You know, and actually encouraging that in your kids in conversation. Family dinner night is brilliant. You know, trapped audience. You know what I mean? No one's going anywhere. We're gonna have a discussion. You know, and being able to have that conversation, but helping them kind of shift that direction into developing that health intelligence. You know, for long life relationships. How would you say?
First of all, what you just said is brilliant, and it's exactly on target. And I just want to reinforce it because it is the old days. The old masculinity was, we will love you more, respect you more, honor you more if you are going off in that Marine uniform, or you're the firefighter in the uniform, or the police officer in the uniform, and you're willing to risk your life. So love was associated with disposability, and it was part of what was necessary for a man to do. Now we're doing what you were saying is exactly right, that we're doing something that is different. We're saying you have that all of these things that you learned in the evolution of becoming a man have value. But they're being used in a different context to teach your children when to take those risks and when not to take those risks. So the essence of being a wonderful dad is to create that balance for your kids, of knowing when to reach out and knowing that, yes, there will be moments of tears. Yes, you will hit your head at times. That's part of what will teach you about when you've gone too far and when you haven't gone too far. And this is and mom working with dad with this is going to create the children that will be getting not just the best grades that you'll be able to brag about going to Harvard or Yale or whatever, but the children that are going to be the happiest emotionally, that are going to be making intelligent and thoughtful decisions about what they want to do with their life. They're going to create the boys that will be able to, if they want to be a nurse rather than a doctor, will not feel that they're not being a man by being a nurse, because they'll have your emotional support to know that that's the amount and level of caring that they wish to do given what their personality is.
It's so empowering is what it is. It's really
empowering. And to think that men had the power when they had to climb a ladder to get to a higher rung on a wall that they never wanted to be against is a complete misunderstanding of power. Power is not about feeling obligated to earn money that someone else spends while you die sooner. Or power is not about feeling obligated to earn money that makes you lose the glint in your eye. Discover who you are. That's what your parents' job is to do, is to help their children discover two things: who they are, and then how do you become responsible to the people you've made obligations to. The moment you marry, you may have to compromise who you are in relation to the glint in your eye, versus your children, versus what you have to do to earn money for your children. But very rarely will you have to sacrifice it as much as we used to think that you did. Because we know now so well that children do not need money nearly as much as they need this guidance, and especially our sons do, because our sons have less clarity of purpose than they've ever had before, but they have a greater opportunity than they've ever had before to be somebody that wasn't prescribed and in a rigid uniform doing something in a predictable way. They have a chance to be their unique selves. You kind of keep touching on this, and you haven't actually said this specific thing, and I keep hearing it as a constant thread when I was reading the book, in our discussions. You talked about the social bribes kind of coming back to and tying to a person's sense of approval or need for approval. When we're helping ourselves as fathers or with our children, either our sons or our daughters, but obviously in the context of our sons, how do you help an individual move past the self-sacrificial drive of the heroic intelligence, sort of the negative side of that, moving them into a health intelligence? Where do you find the kind of those steps to do that personally? Do you know what I mean? If I'm listening to it, thinking of areas of my life where oh wow, that's what I was doing here, or I'm in conversation with someone. What are some of those basics? You keep kind of touching on this need for approval. Sorry. Hold for 1 second. I have
No worries.
Battling a cold here.
My apologies. How do you move past that? Because that need for approval is really strong. It's a huge driving thing. Obviously, for myself, dealing with insecurities, as a young man, shifting my sense of getting approval from other people versus getting it from God. That's where the big shift was for me. But a lot of people that may be listening or having this conversation, they may not know God, they may not have a relationship with God, maybe they're not even in that context. But where have you found the beginning stages are for most men to kind of make that shift?
Yes, the most important thing you can do as a dad for that is the family dinner night. And the family dinner night, especially by making sure that I suggest I have five very important essential guidelines for that in the book, and
it's so practical. I love it.
And the number one guideline is no electronics at the table. Another guideline is making sure that that as long as your children are of an appropriate age, rotating the facilitator of the family dinner night each time, and having the family dinner night facilitator give a certain amount of time, depending on how many children you have, et cetera, for check-in. So everybody gets a check-in time, and that check-in time is limited. One person is not allowed to go off and dominate the check-in time. And then you either have a topic that you choose ahead of time, like what to do about maybe playing a sport in school, or what to do about what major one of your children should be in college, or what to do about the fact that Jimmy seems to be beating up on Johnny too often, and so the topic might be a family dilemma that is sort of under the radar and needs to be brought up, but each person in the family, by rotating the facilitatorship, has a chance to choose his or her topic to be brought up. So everybody in the family, given an appropriate age, can do that. And then each person in the family is expected to listen without judgment while each person is talking about, and has maybe 4 or 5 minutes to just share what is on their mind about that topic. And then the rest of the family goes and gives their perspective on it. But while each person is speaking, the listening process is totally with that person. And if there's enough time and the family is small enough, sharing other family members sharing what they heard the person saying, and staying with them until that person says, "Now I feel heard." But not saying to your brother, your sister, your father, or your mother, or vice versa, "I understand," because "I understand" is usually a way of saying "shut up." Instead of like, "I've got it, no problem,
so
get on." And so there's a number of guidelines like that that are very important to make sure that family dinner night does not become a family dinner nightmare. A second thing that's really important is the faith-based community. The faith-based community, especially when they have somebody like yourself who's a youth minister, can really facilitate small groups of boys and girls to sort of help them articulate and separate out what are they doing for approval. What are they doing to make their ability to have a mask of strength and I'm right and I'm going to want to be admired. Does that cheerleader really want to be a cheerleader? What exactly is she saying as a cheerleader? 1st and 10, do it again. What is the it that she's encouraging a boy to do? Oh, get a concussion, a spinal cord injury? Is that what she really is hoping for? Or is that what she feels that she as a cheerleader will be most admired for cheering those cheers? And so you're introducing to your family a way of thinking through and differentiating the things that the society is encouraging the child to do versus what they can see, discern what the reasons are, the motivations they are doing. Do I feel I get more love and approval that way? Well, we want you to know, son and daughter, that you're getting the love and approval from us that'll be the most important. And the faith-based community to be able to be facilitating the boys and girls in that faith-based community to think through what are they doing and for what reasons are they doing it. Even why are they worshiping God? Is it because their friend came to church, or do they find God in their own heart? And what does finding God in their own heart mean to them? And then
Those are really powerful questions.
Thank you. And another is Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. We now have, as I discuss in the Boy Crisis book, we have hard data to show that children that remain in Cub Scouts for 2 or 3 years and go consistently develop better character, better integrity. These are the important things that every Christian wants their family and members to have. And it's these things that Cub Scouts do in combination with the responsibility, the follow through, the be prepared mottos, and they do it as a group. So I was talking about social approval before. Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts have very good mottos for getting social approval by doing the right things, that the most healthy aspects of masculinity. And getting merit badges. Not only are getting the merit badge, but usually if in Boy Scouts you're going for a merit badge, you have a mentor there that helps you guide you through that process. You can experiment with many different activities that you might feel like you will get fulfillment from, and a mentor to help you do it. And then the last thing that really I encourage every father to help and mother to help their children with is to not only mentor, but also, yes, not only be mentored and find a mentor, but also be a mentor.
Yeah.
Children, we now know, develop more effectively when they are a mentor to someone, because they're judging their each behavior with how how will that behavior look to this person I'm mentoring?
Yeah.
Am I in integrity with what I'm telling them to do? Am I walking my talk?
Yeah.
And when a boy or girl is looking at themselves with that sense of responsibility and pride, that's when they tend to grow the most in their own integrity and their own emotional intelligence.
It's interesting. One of the other things I noticed, you kind of touched on it again here, as I was reading the book, I started, as you're kind of describing the different roles of dads and fathers in the family, I started to end up having this question. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like a lot of times, especially in kind of today's climate, you hear people talk about, oh man, the Bible, pushes a patriarchy. It's like, that's like a religious thing. It's patriarchy, this whole kind of thing. And you start laying out the influence of a father on identity, on healthy sense of approval of where that comes from, the empathy, health intelligence, all of these different kind of perspectives. And the whole time I'm reading this thinking, this is the picture of God as our father throughout the scripture. Like the idea of patriarchy in the scripture is really like a misinterpretation of what is actually described as a father coming in. There's like verses about he wants to lead you with his eye. In other words, like leading you with connection, like heartfelt love connection, where you're fighting to guard your connection with him just as much as he is with you. You know what I mean? That sense of that sort of leadership and connection, and there's so many different verses, and then you end up dropping that like part way in the book. You're like, and some of the research I found as meeting with like these different men's groups, like faith-based communities, and of where like, hey, God as our father can actually step in.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that is the invitation of like, hey, it doesn't matter how broken of a home you came from, how broken your identity is, how broken of your past it is. Like God as your father can actually step in there and cause and bring healing to those areas of your heart, and actually kind of set the stage to kind of reverse almost the emptiness that was there in some of those places.
Absolutely. I saw this, as I think I mentioned to you last time, when I was I went to Bedford-Stuyvesant, which is one of the poorest areas in the country. And I spoke at the Bedford-Stuyvesant Baptist Church.
Oh,
and,
that's right, yeah.
And there were about 700 people in the congregation, not coming to see me, but coming to be with God. But not this one.
Yeah.
Let me make it really clear.
That's hilarious.
And then afterwards, the minister, the pastor, took me back, and he sat me down with 28 young men. Maybe 32, about that had in 4 different men's groups that they had started in the church.
Yeah.
And almost all of the men, except for about 4, said to me that they had been in prison for either doing drugs or doing some type of robbing a store or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, how important was was finding God to you? And virtually every boy said, I would still be doing my drugs. I would still be doing, the robbing and taking risks if it wasn't for finding God.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I think the boys were so successful in helping to have their faith-based community help them make a transformation was because they weren't just going and listening to sermons.
Yeah.
They were talking with each other, and they were being facilitated by a youth minister that was helping them not feel ashamed when they were saying what they did for.
Yeah.
I sold drugs because I was hoping that I could make some money, and that was the best way I could make some money. And then if I made some money, I could get a car, and then this girl would go out with me, and and other guys would respect me. That type of thing.
Yeah.
And that was really, why was I doing that? Was that what God would want me to do?
Yeah.
And so those are the types of, but boys especially, because there's so much pressure on boys to repress their feelings, it is therefore pivotal for a faith-based community's leader to help boys express their feelings and to know that a boy who represses his feelings is not a man. He has repressed part of who he is as a man. And that is therefore, and what did God create? God created a man, not a repressed part. You don't want to be cutting off what God created.
It's really powerful. And even in that kind of context, you've kind of described some of the science and some of the research of like what is described in the Bible as being born again. You're a new creation. That old man is gone, and there's a new. You're a new person.
Yes.
And kind of in that context of like reestablishing identity, kind of in those things where it's like you're actually set free from what you were before, and then that there's that language that's throughout Scripture, but it's like it's fun to kind of see the science and some of the research kind of in the mind, like what happens in the psychology realm, with those that conversion process, so to speak. It's kind of it's a really fun for me. It's super fun, but
and the science is amazing. So I'll give just one example of this, but there's hundreds. So by the age of 9, a boy and a girl who have significant father contact have telomeres that are 14% longer than a boy and girl who do not have significant father involvement.
Now, by age, what age?
9. By age 9.
Oh my gosh.
So now here are what telomeres are for people not familiar with them. Telomeres are the part of your cell which when your cell reproduces, which it is doing constantly, either do or do not reproduce all the genes that you have in your cell that help you to guard against cancer, guard against other diseases. So the shorter your telomeres are, by the age of 9, the shorter your life expectancy, according to the National Academy of Sciences. And so your telomeres without father involvement are 14% shorter. However,
that's crazy.
They're 40% shorter. Boys are yet again 40% shorter than girls.
Oh my gosh.
So, boys' life expectancy is about 17% shorter with those shorter telomeres without the father involvement. And daughters, are about 11, 12% shorter. And so we get some sense of the science behind the importance of the involvement of dads. And I do have to go.
Yes.
But it's been just delightful talking with you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much.
The people who work with you are really blessed.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yes,
oh my goodness. Really quick again, The Boy Crisis. It's out on audiobook. I've actually been listening to it and reading it. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, like commuting and working out and stuff. It's been super fun. You read it.
And you seem to be... you've said to me before our interview that you actually got more joy out of listening to it.
I do, actually. For me, it's fun because it kind of connects me with you as the author. I get to hear your kind of voice and inflections in it. And it's an unabridged version. Sometimes on audiobooks, they kind of like cut out certain sections to make it, flow better. But you're not missing out doing the audiobook version. So it's pretty awesome.
It was, I spent 5 days doing that, and it was really, I'm thinking, is anybody going to do this? And it's selling as well as the print book. And I'm so glad because it is nice to sort of feel like I can connect with you with my voice, and that feels like it's a better connection.
It's awesome. Well, whatever we can do, this message has to get out. If you're listening and you haven't read it, please go get The Boy Crisis, read it, give it to everyone that you know. It's just finishing up the book. I ended with just this like almost frustration of like, how do we get this message out there? Like we've got to be talking about this, and so. That's why we're doing this, and I can't wait to see the impact of it. It's already had impact in my family, our family dinner nights. We've kind of changed the format of some of them right away. I mean, as I'm reading it, we already were kind of doing family dinner nights. I'm like, okay, no, we're implementing this, and I love how every section that you have in there. And if you're listening, if you're wondering this right now, every section you kind of talk a little bit of theory, science, and then you hit really practical tools, like right away. So as you're listening, like you can get through the first chapter and walk away with practical tools. And I love that. Thank you for
Thank you. Yes.
writing it that way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really my commitment to
Yeah.
when I bring up a problem that I have, that I have a solution. I have a solution a family can use, the school can use, and that if legislators will listen, that they could use as well.
Yeah.
And so thank you for acknowledging that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, and we really appreciate your time.
It's been just a total pleasure.
Awesome.